guys, it's your girl Mantate. Welcome to another episode of The Good News Is, where we profile and celebrate initiatives by young people in Zimbabwe, in Africa, who are responding to the socio-economic challenges of COVID-19. One of the greatest things, or rather the most inspiring things for me so far, has been looking at the fact that some of these initiatives are not new. They've been there before and they just were tailor-made to kind of meet the demands of this current environment, but also just looking at initiatives that started now that are able to look at the beyond the pandemic period, because I think one of the biggest things that's so important, that's actually very imperative right now, is the issue of sustainability of these initiatives. Will they survive beyond the pandemic? Because when we come back to this new normal, challenges are still going to exist. So I'm really excited about challenges that go beyond that. And one of the things that I've really just noticed about the profiles I've shared so far is that I haven't really touched much on education. And it's a very important factor, especially right now, because when governments actually affected or put into effect these lockdowns to curb the spread of COVID-19, schools closed. Tertiary institutions, secondary institutions, primary institutions, we're looking at vocational training centers, technical colleges, and literally every educational center closed down. So what happens then is that there's this question that arises to say, okay, we are not very certain how long this is going to last, but also looking at what happens to students in the interim. I was looking at students online in other countries where teachers are sending materials online. They're able to just use their iPads, just log online to the learning platform, and they're still able to continue. I see other universities kind of still offering exams online. And we're looking at Africa and looking at Zimbabwe as well to say, that's a bit of a non-starter for us, because we already don't have that much, if at all, any digital learning platform that is actually ongoing right now. So I think it's a very important thing for me to talk about education and the concept of what are young people doing to bridge the gap in terms of increasing access to digital education. Also just trying to make sure that students keep learning, even though we're on lockdown and we're very uncertain about when they're opening schools. So one of the initiatives that I want to talk about is an initiative in Kenya by a young person called Kelvin Guma. So Kelvin runs an initiative, or rather runs a Said Community Library. So this Said Community Library falls under the Said organization. Said is more an acronym for Sabatia Initiative for Sustainable Development, which is really just premised on the idea that when communities are empowered in terms of skills, in terms of knowledge, and just really generally raising awareness around critical development processes around them, we're able to kind of improve and empower communities into better livelihoods. So what happens with this particular library is that they normally provide free learning to children. They actually have about 15 schools registered that they actually provide learning to. And what they then did was that they decided that, there is now the pandemic. How do we make sure that we still have teachers providing this learning opportunity for young people, especially looking at those that can actually access this internet or online learning? So what happens is that every day they actually have 3 teachers that come in and live stream lectures. So there's a teacher that provides learning materials on mathematics, there's a teacher for chemistry, there's also a teacher for English. So why I feel this is a very important aspect is that these are volunteer teachers to start with, and the fact that they actually made their own they did a makeshift recording studio within the library. So I think for me the biggest has been that these are young people identifying the resources that are already there and saying, how do we utilize the space that we have and the networks of teachers that we have to ensure that young people keep learning, to ensure that students keep learning even during this pandemic, which I think is powerful, and it can actually be replicated across different communities in Africa. Because if you're looking at 3 teachers, for instance, it's not like they're going to be in the same space at the same time. They're just using the same space but at different times. So there's that aspect of social distancing as well, which I think is very important right now. But beyond that project in Kenya, there's also a project in Tanzania, actually by a young person that's called George Akili Mali. So what's happening with George? Well, the tech gurus, he actually produced this application that provides digital learning materials for anyone, literally. And one of the things I like about him is that he decided that we're going to localize this information. They're looking at an era where information is literally readily available online. But the biggest question was, how do we contextualize this information to the local curriculum beyond just contextualizing it in terms of the content that's given, but also trying to come up with ways in which you can integrate local languages. So this application also provides information in Swahili and Bantu languages as well, which I think is very interesting, because one of the biggest challenges that I've seen in not just the pandemic or the information that's being disseminated around the pandemic, but also just looking at education in general, we tend to import, not necessarily from the West or wherever, but we tend to bring in information with so much technicality. I mean, there's technical terms that we're not translating or contextualizing to the experiences of people, to the language of local communities, which makes it very difficult for people to learn. So what these guys decided to do was, okay, we've got all this information available, how do we contextualize it to the local curriculum? Beyond that, how do we use the local language so that people understand? Which I think is very exciting, because people are able to participate if it's a discussion, if it's an explanation, and just basics understanding of whatever they're learning. It becomes very easier if it's available in a local language. And the other interesting thing is that the materials that they have on that application available, there's HD videos, there's 3D and 2D animation, and also audios as well. And I think for me, the reason why I feel these initiatives are important is because one of the biggest challenges I've really been thinking around has been that in as much as we want to go digital, I've seen the government of Zimbabwe expressing an interest in digitalizing education, but we're also looking at how many people in Zimbabwe can access the data to actually be online and learn, but also how many of these have phones that are very compatible with this online learning platforms that we're trying to put forward. But also just looking at that, because we also don't want to oppose development, we're looking at a situation where we need to find a way of balancing, increasing access to digital devices that can actually be compatible with this information that people are receiving, but also looking at how do we reduce the cost of data, because it's very expensive, especially in Zim. Today, everyone is fuming on Twitter where we're talking about how it can increase data at a time when people feel that it should actually be cheaper, because people need to be online. People are trying to read online. People are trying to work online. So it's very difficult when internet is very expensive. So yeah, I think I'll try and find more education-oriented initiatives by young people, because I feel it's very important, because right now we don't know where this is going. We don't know when we're going back to school. And just going back to school, there's always that question of how do we digitalize? Because this has been a lesson for all of us that we can't rely on the traditional way of teaching. We need to find ways of actually falling back on something if anything like this ever happens. So yeah, keep the positive news coming. If you've got an initiative that you're doing or that you see happening in your community, don't forget to reach out and let me know so that I can feature it, because what we're doing is really just profiling the amazing work of young people and trying to show that African youth have it in them, especially when they are supported. They have really creative ideas and the commitment to actually see them through. So yeah, catch me on another episode of The Good News. Thank you. Boy.